Sunsoft's run on the Sega Genesis started off with a bang. The first title I played from them was Batman, an action platformer that had fun gameplay and a killer soundtrack. Super Fantasy Zone was a great looking and sounding update to the classic Sega shooter, and I enjoyed that one as well. Both were done in-house by Sunsoft and both were instant 16-bit classics. But in 1992 there was a sharp turn in Sunsoft's strategy, the use of outside studios for their games. As a publisher, their releases were all over the place in terms of quality. Superman was okay, Revenge of the Joker sucked, and Lemmings was, well, Lemmings. In 1993, Sunsoft teamed up with Iguana Entertainment for Aero the Acrobat, a side-scrolling platformer trying to take advantage of the 16-bit mascot craze that had gripped the industry. It wasn't a bad little game, all things considered. It was bright, colorful, and had some decent animation. It sold well enough for Sunsoft to use the character to represent the company in many of its US and European ads. It also spawned a spin-off and a sequel in that order over the next 2 years. In this episode, we are going to focus on the former and talk about Zero the Kamikaze Squirrel. I've got a full review for you, so let's get started. Released in November of 1994 and developed by Iguana Entertainment, Zero the Kamikaze Squirrel is a side story that takes place in between Aero the Acrobat 1 and 2. If you aren't familiar with the story of the first Aero, Zero was one of the bad guys in that game. Due to Zero's intense jealousy of Aero's skills, he deploys the Psycho Circus Gang to trip up Aero at every turn. Along with the evil circus clown Edgar Ector, these guys were causing Aero all sorts of grief right up to the end of the first title. When this game here starts, Zero returns home only to find an evil lumberjack is chopping down all the trees. This evil dude plans to use it to make tons of paper to create counterfeit money, and of course, Zero is the only one that can stop him. Gameplay is mostly a side-scrolling action platformer. Zero has ninja stars that he can throw and hit enemies at distance. He can throw them while standing or jumping, as well as above and below him. He also has nunchucks for close quarters when he's in the crouching position. This is limited in range but very powerful. Zero can also do something the manual calls a flick-flack, which is a kick attack in the air. He also has a few other nifty moves that center around jumping. First is the double jump, which aside from being used to get to higher ground, can also be used as a direct attack. Simply jump and hit jump again to pull it off. There is also a dive bomb that lets you attack enemies directly below you. This move is important and gives you an impressive array of control while in the air. If you just dive, it's basically an attack and a fast way to get to lower areas. You can also swoop out of this for a huge buildup of speed that can shoot Zero long distances. This swoop is an attack itself, so spend some time getting a feel for it. This aerial control makes this one special, and a seasoned Zero player can really dominate the playfield with constant movement forward and a wide variety of offensive moves to play with. Stage-wise, things are very simple. Most of the early stages are large and open, allowing you to run amok and get a feel for Zero's arsenal of moves. Later stages tighten things up and become more challenging, especially with enemies able to block some of your attacks. There are also a couple of vehicle stages mixed in throughout the game for a change of pace. Your health is represented in the lower left-hand corner of the screen. You start with 4 hit points that can be expanded up to 6. Zero is challenging, but thankfully includes unlimited continues, starting you back at the beginning of the stage you were on. Checkpoints are also available to help you out. Be sure to look around and check for various items littered about. You can get more throwing stars, food for bonus points, coins for extra lives, Z icons for extra health, and of course, the coveted 1-up. As you might expect, Zero is for one player only. Right from the opening plane ride, you know that Zero is gonna be a great looking game. Parallax adorns many of the backgrounds, the 16 megabits of animation looks spectacular, and I dare say that the color pops far more than the first Aero in pretty much every way. I also loved many of the special effects like the light sourcing underground when an enemy bites the dust, and the way the background scrolls in the factory to make it look nearly three-dimensional. The speed of everything is also impressive. You get Zero moving well, and this can be just as speedy as a Sonic title, and that's saying something considering it's a third-party product. But it's pretty clear that the 16 megabits of this one were primarily used for the animation and enemy variety. Though the stages look great, there aren't many of them. After the beach and cliffs, there's a couple of cave areas, a forest, and then a factory, and that's it. Even with that said, the animation is worth the price of admission. Every jump, attack, change of direction, and position has its own frames, a startling difference from the games that represented the genre just a few years before. The Genesis also holds its own against the Super Nintendo version. Side by side, you see the two compare well, and though Nintendo's platform does enjoy a clear advantage in color, Zero on Sega's Beast appears sharper. Let's have a quick montage from a few of the stages. Iguana chose to go with the GEM sound driver for Zero, and it's a mixed bag all the way around. Most of the sound effects are decent and get the job done. The Bruce Lee-like screams from Zero himself are a little rough though, and the music lacks any real excitement or motivation to push you through the stage. In fact, little of the soundtrack actually fits the environment at all. None of this sounds bad to me, it's just nowhere near the level the best these kinds of games are capable of. I mean, play something like Sonic and then listen to this, and you'll see what I mean. Music tends to be one of the most contentious forms of art, however, so I have a few examples to see if you like it. Zero is one of those 16-bit games that came along during the explosion of animal mascot titles for tons of companies. What's funny is that he was a bad guy originally, the one trying to crush a lovable hero and make his life miserable. It's a bit like if RoboSonic had his own game, or if Shiva went on his own adventure in between the Streets of Rage titles. I appreciate the change-up and the more aggressive art design of Zero and his enemies, but as cool as the character is, the gameplay can be a tough slog of cheap enemies and loads of insta-deaths. Yup, this one can be unforgiving in the late game. Zero is certainly competent enough when he's throwing his stars and using his nunchucks, but when you get this little dude in the air, it takes some serious practice before any real magic happens. It takes a ton of tries to get it under control, with both the gliding and swooping aerial mechanics feeling different from just about anything else in the genre. Experiment with it, try it out in different areas, get a feel for the touch and go nature of it. You'll find that it's just as important as the basic attacks in the early game, and far more so the deeper you get in. Getting this little guy to go where you want him is key to the end game, because let me tell you, watching my friends play the ending stage was painful as they were annihilated time and time again. That's going to be a real area of contention in this one. Those that hang in there will find a rewarding experience, but casual players will likely be crushed under a mountain of stage restarts that will quickly try their patience. Add in enemies that block and have invincible frames, and this one has rage quit written all over it. I find that Zero really trips up in this regard. It goes from having fun to dying repeatedly fairly quickly. Zero can be beaten in about an hour by a strong player, but even with unlimited continues, most will need much more than that to see the ending. I believe the lack of stage variety is directly connected to that spike in difficulty. The developers knew they had a relatively short game in 1994, so they made that final few areas a real pain. The music is also a sore spot overall. I don't know, it just doesn't come off as something that adds much to the experience. It isn't high energy or upbeat, it isn't memorable or catchy, it just sort of exists and amounts to little more than background noise. Aside from those complaints, Zero is actually a very decent title for a Western developed Sunsoft release. It's got the looks and the design of a winner, and gameplay that sets it apart during a time when platformers were a dime a dozen. You'll need to invest some time and patience to fully appreciate it, but Zero is certainly worth a try. Of course, in today's hypersensitive culture, I doubt any company would attempt to resurrect the IP for a remake or a sequel. Fortunately, if you don't own this one yet, there is a current reissue available from Limited Run Games you can pre-order. You can pick it up on both the Genesis and Super Nintendo in a special two-toned cartridge. Pre-orders in February 4th. The price is rather steep, but considering places like eBay often go for quite a bit more, it's a cheaper option. As far as media reviews of Zero at the time of its release, they were usually mostly positive. Electronic Gaming Monthly praised it as an all-around great adventure. While GamePro enjoyed the visuals and thought it was fun, they found the sound was poor and the gameplay was difficult to get a handle on. Pretty much all of the UK magazines loved it. Mean Machines was nothing but praise, and Sega Pro rated it as strongly as the Aero titles. Most other places found it to be enjoyable as well. But despite all that critical love and admiration, Zero was still a release that came and went without much fanfare. It came out at the end of 1994, got a few ads, and then it was gone. I can only assume that it was lost in the shuffle at retail against giants like Mickey Mania, Sonic & Knuckles, Earthworm Jim, and The Lion King. This game type was extremely popular at the time, and the competition for your gaming dollar was fierce. That may mean many of you missed this one back in the day, and this review is primarily for you. Zero is a fun platformer with a very unique and challenging playstyle. With a bit of trial and error, I'm confident many of you will love it. I'm Sega Lord X. Thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you next time.